Today we're going to talk about setting. And the thing to remember about setting is that it is never in the background. What does that mean? Well, setting is the thing in which the action happens. The characters live in the setting. But unlike a set for a play, where the set is in the background and is meant to show off the characters, setting in fiction is everything. It is the local geography, of course, but it's also the culture in which the characters were raised. It is the rules of physics in your world. Can these characters jump 5 feet or 50 feet in the air? So in this way, setting isn't in the background. It's more like your characters are fish and the setting is the water. And much like we live, where we have a physical environment, but we also have ephemeral, abstract environments, pressures on us all the time. And you can see this as an example as money, right? Which inherently should not have value, and yet has value. Why? Well, because that's the way our setting, our culture works. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the importance of setting and how to reveal setting to your reader. Now over here we have a couple of circles, and I know some of you have seen this before, but I want to go over it again real quick for those that haven't. And you can think about setting having 3 layers. The first layer is the local setting. This is what your characters can physically touch and see and smell in their immediate environment. What is in the room with them? What does that room smell like? What sounds come into that room? If you want to experience your local setting, close your eyes right now. You can pause this and then just listen, smell, feel. And that will give you those precise details about your local setting. So these are the things your characters can run over to, pick up, and then throw if they need to. The next layer is the cultural layer. This layer is made up of the culture of this setting. What do these characters believe in? What is it that they use to govern themselves? What type of government? So these things are abstractions, right? You can't pick up and throw a government at someone else, but it certainly does have influence over your characters' lives. So what are the things that your character society decide on as the way that they are going to govern themselves? Okay? And then finally, we have global. And these are the details that can't be changed in your world. Or maybe they can, but they are big things. For instance, our global setting is that we have gravity. We have a sun. We have 8 planets, because one of them got voted off the island, so to speak. These are global things. We do not have magic. We cannot teleport, at least not yet, right? So these tend to be bedrock rules by which your setting operates. This isn't to say that magic can't come into existence, or that we can't invent teleportation. But those are big events that affect everything about your world. So as you see, as we go in towards the middle, we get smaller and smaller. So again, local, the physical setting, cultural, it's a little bit bigger than that, and then global is the universe itself, where cultural can change from, say, country to country, world to world, right? But global is going to encompass all of those. So that's a pretty basic way of looking at setting. What we're going to do today is complicate it just a little bit. And we are going to do that by talking about how much detail does your setting need? And the answer is different for different pieces. But remember, the setting is never in the background, right? So the setting is important. It's there. It covers every aspect of your character's lives. But how much time do you need to develop the setting? And here we have a spectrum. Then on this side, we have no setting. Can you do such a thing? Absolutely. We'll talk about it in just a second. And on this side, we have only setting. Can you do that? Absolutely. Of course you can. Okay. So things that don't have a setting. This would be Beckett's work. Beckett famously wrote pieces that didn't have settings. Waiting for Godot is his most famous piece, and it involves two people sitting on a bench in a park. That's it. That's all the setting you get, a bench in a park. Another piece, An Act Without Names, exists in a desert. It is featureless. It is a bunch of sand. There isn't any setting. Okay? So, he also wrote, Endgame, in which there are people inside a room and nothing exists outside of it. And the room is barren. Right? So he tried to remove setting from his work. And I might post one of these plays so you can get a sense of what I mean about how barren his settings are. But there's a point to that. If you remove setting, what is left? All of a sudden you have characters. Allegory. He played with allegory quite a bit. Language, right? You're focusing back on language because there's not much going on, either plot-wise. Beckett was famous for hacking off everything he could out of his writing and seeing what was left. Okay, so as we continue along the spectrum, we get to something like fairy tales. Fairy tales have settings, but these settings tend to be visited in only a sentence, maybe two. Hansel and Gretel are in a forest. And then they go to the witch's hut. That's it. What do we know about the witch's hut? Well, it has a stove in it. Why? Because the witch ends up in it eventually. But that's all we know about that setting. Do we know it? And that's all local, right? Things that they can touch. Do we know what country they're in? No. Do we know what type of government that country has? Absolutely not. Do we know if they're free market or communist? No idea. That's not the point, right? And global isn't visited at all, and when it's not visited, we assume it's the same as ours. Okay? So fairy tales spend very little time on their setting, but primarily because they don't need to. Like Beckett took no setting, these give you just a little bit of a setting. Just a little taste of what this world is like, and that's enough, because the setting isn't the most important aspect. It's the moral that you're going to learn. Next, we have something like Star Wars. Or you could put any sci-fi or fantasy. This is our sci-fi, fantasy, Star Wars section. These are complicated settings. There are rules here. All of a sudden with Star Wars, we have the Force. Right? And that changes how this world works. You also have different cultures, the Empire versus the Rebellion, and then you have the local things with the the settings the characters are moving through. And because Star Wars is so different, we now have spaceships and lightsabers and the Force and a guy dressed in black that sounds like he's speaking through a fan. That takes a lot of setting up. And so Star Wars spends a lot of time on its setting. And can you do only setting? Yes, of course you can. Blake Butler's Scorch Atlas, which I'll post, is nothing but setting. The characters aren't even really there. It's just it's how the world ends is really what it is. It's a bunch of short stories about how the world ends. And it's the setting. It's the setting that is important. So, think about this in terms of your own writing. How much time do you need to develop to develop the setting? How much detail does your setting need? Because the rule is that you should always know more about the setting than you tell. Move this over. So when George Lucas wrote Star Wars, he had a better understanding of the setting than he put into the movies. In fairy tales, the Grimm brothers, who collected them, had a better understanding of the setting than they put into the stories themselves. So this is something for you to think about. Think about your world. Think about the local, the cultural, the global aspects of your world. Because you should know everything there is to know about this world, even if you don't put it into your writing. Of course you can't put it into your writing. To put everything in would be impossible. But what details do you need to include so that the reader can experience your world, and then you keep the rest of them to yourself? That way the world makes sense. It's coherent. And again, that's an important aspect of this. To only reveal the most important details. Okay, hopefully this gives you some ideas about setting. Let me know if you have any questions.